Welcome back to Country Dance Spotlight. My name is Rob Ironside. I'm the president for the Country Pride Dance Club and also one of the instructors. And again, with me here today is Stuart, Stuart Old. Stuart is our grants director, but he does way more than that. How you doing, Stuart?
Doing great, thanks.
So this is our 8th podcast, and today's topic is talking about the type of music that we dance to and the different dances. Stuart's going to talk about it from his perspective. He joined the club a little later than I did, and so he joined, and I hate to admit this, a couple decades later. So his experience at this is a little bit different than mine. And the music that he got involved with at the time was different than when I got involved. Um, we were just talking about that. Stuart, what some of the music that you remember when you first got involved?
Yeah, so I mean, when I sort of got into it, it would have been like Toby Keith and Eric Church and that kind of thing. Were sort of like the country artists that were really mainstream. And then I used to think of, I guess, CCR as country. That's kind of rock. But when I got into like Country Pride Dance Club, there was a lot of other influences coming into country music anyway. And that's just like, I joined up because I wanted to learn how to two-step because I thought everyone two-stepped. Well, as we're going to get to this, it's not really that simple.
No, it is. There's a lot more detail to it in history. And like Stuart just alluded to, there's been many influences in the country music scene over the years. When I got involved, George Strait was one of them. And then as I did a little bit of digging about history, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. Do you know how long those guys have been around? Since the 1970s, the early 1970s. So yeah, crazy. But that's kind of the stuff that, I remember when I first got involved and it attracted me to it too. So as we were, again, talking before we started the podcast here a little bit, the different dances that we did. Stuart got involved with two-step, as did I. That was one of the things that attracted me to country music. But there was also other dances like polka, waltz, that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about that a little bit as far as the different dances you do to what music, and how the different influences make a difference for the songs. Anyways, so many influences over the years into country. Ballroom, Latin, swing, rockabilly. It really depends on the artist that you listen to as far as what dance you do. And some other art forms called ballroom and even in the swing community, they have certain songs that are their standard that they stick with. And that kind of defines, what a certain, dance is. Whereas ours, we've always kept changing the music or changing with the music as it changes.
Right.
And so it's been fun, but at the same time, that's been kind of challenging. It's one thing to say, okay, well, we have 8 different dances. When I first got involved, there was dances that were around. We'll talk about the history, like the chautis and the shuffle, and those ones have pretty much gone by the wayside. So as much as that's kind of interesting, it also is a bit of a challenge for beginners when they first get involved. So you were mentioning that you joined because of two-step. We're going to talk about how do you recognize what a two-step is to the music. And
yeah, I mean, now that I've had a bit of experience with it, you kind of, you you sort of match it because you imagine yourself doing it to that music, or else you don't, and then whatever, that is too fast, or like what we're getting to, maybe it's the wrong time signature.
Yeah. So when we're listening to music and deciding what dances we're going to do to it, tempo, rhythm, and the accent of music, like Stuart was just talking about, makes a difference to decide if you're going to do a two-step to it or if it's a polka, for example. So when we say tempo is the speed, and the speed for two steps are actually quite a wide range, anywhere from about the high 130 beats per minute to almost 220 beats per minute. And we're not going to get into that today for each of them, but that just gives you an idea of how many beats per minute would be a two-step, for example. We're also just going to touch on rhythm, rhythm being the accent, or sorry, the rhythm being the time signature for the song. So what we do for that, and I'll talk about rhythm here in a few minutes. And also the accent. Where is the accent? Is there a heavy bass beat all the time on every
Right.
beat, or is it, or every fifth beat, or, and that also helps determine what kind of dance that you're going to do to it. So the rhythms that we dance to, and there's more rhythms out there than this, is 2/4, 4/4, or 3/4 time. So 2/4 and 4/4 are very, very similar as far as their rhythm. Let's just talk about 3/4 rhythm first, because that one's easy. 3/4 rhythm is your waltz music. So it
Right.
goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's a phrase of music, and that's a basic set of footwork, and it works exactly to the music, and it's
Mm-hmm.
phrased. And waltz is one that's by itself in country, and there's a lot of really beautiful waltz music that's out there in country music, and people love to dance to it. um, have you done any waltz classes with us? I can't
I
remember.
might have had like one session with you, but honestly, that's it.
Yeah.
I have had very little experience with it, so I can. I mean, we'll probably get to this, but it's not like you go to a lot of places where they're playing waltz music
Yeah.
to
Or
do.
people think it's waltz and it's not, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So 3/4 time is waltz music, and now let's talk about 2/4 and 4/4 time music. And they're very, very similar. But my brief explanation of this is 2/4 means there are two quarter notes or two beats per measure, while 4/4 means there's four quarter notes or four beats per measure. The biggest difference is the main difference is 2/4 rhythm. You have a strong and then a weak beat. So it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So every odd number would be a fairly heavy beat. Whereas in 4/4 time, the heavy beat is every fifth, or sorry, it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so those two rhythms incorporate all the other dances that we do. Now the confusing part is, what dances do you do to 2/4 and 4/4 time? What makes it easier? And we are going
Right.
to do a podcast specifically for that, but that's not, again, not today's topic. Um, there are some that are easier to dance the dance to 2/4, and others are easier to dance the dance to 4/4 time. But as you listen to the songs, and we'll just take two step for a quick example here again. Because two step has 6 beats of music, and you're dancing it to 4/4 time, you actually, it takes 8 beats of music to do a full phrase of music, but it takes 6 beats to do a set of basic footwork. So 6 doesn't fit into 8. And
Right.
so it's not a phrase dance. Now, that explanation might be a little confusing to people who are listening, but just know that a basic set of footwork doesn't fit the phrase of the music like we just talked about waltz did. Waltz fit exactly perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
However, polka, for example, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, it fits a 4/4 time phrasing. So it's considered a phrase dance. We're going to dedicate a whole podcast to that topic in itself, but yeah, we'll kind of leave it at that for today.
So as far as people who are starting out learning like two step, the fact that it's phrased or not phrased doesn't really make a difference when you're a beginner.
No,
Yeah. Okay.
no, you'll just find that certain stuff, there's certain music that has the right speed, and it has the right rhythm, and it has the right accent. Those three ingredients. One will be a better two step. One will be a better
Right.
polka. One will be a better cha cha, for example. And we'll talk about that specifically in a podcast that we're going to do. So, if we break down kind of the history of country music and why it's been really, really interesting, at the same time, it's been a bit of a challenge. In the 70s, when I got involved with dancing, line dancing was the biggest thing that was coming around in the 70s, and two step was popular, waltz was popular, and polka. Those were the mainstays. Those, and actually, when we didn't even call it polka all the time, we called it a dance called shuffle. So between the 1970s and the 1980s, shuffle was a dance that actually did triple steps, just like the polka step, but then you would stand there and do a standing pattern, kind of like a line dance. So it was kind of a mix between the two. You'll see different folk dances or pattern dancers. They do the same kind of thing where they'll dance in, in partners, but they'll dance in a circle and do rotations. It's not square dancing, but it's pattern dancing. And so shuffle is kind of a derivative of that. So originally in the 1970s, and yes, that's when I first got my taste for this, line dancing was huge. And like I say, nitty gritty was one of them. But two step was it, where we started to do all kinds of turns and stuff to the music. Waltz, because there was all kinds of ballads being written at that
Right,
time,
of
uh,
course.
old traditional stuff like Charlie Pride and Tammy Wynette and I don't know. There's just all kinds of stuff back from those decades that was it was really interesting. In fact, I'm going to actually switch to a graphic here. Hopefully, I can do this seamlessly and give you a little bit of history on this kind of stuff because it is interesting. So, Stuart, hopefully you can see that now.
Oh yeah, I got
Yeah.
it.
We're not going to go all the way back to there, but what I do want to just talk about is starting right here. So, does this show my mouse and the writing?
It does, yeah.
So, Hillbilly Boogie, Bluegrass and Gospel, Honky Tonk, those were some of the original things that were country dancing. But then there was influences rockabilly, where rock and roll started to get involved, and the
Mm.
evolution from the 50s and 60s really did set the stage for the whole Nashville and the whole, I don't know if you want to call it more modern, but country music definitely started to change. Then they talk about this, and this is straight off of Wikipedia. Western merges with country, and so then the image of cowboy boots with all of the music made what they call the fourth generation of country. And this is when I got involved, was in the 70s, and they talk about, and you can see here Willie Nelson and Dolly Parton. Here's John Denver. I remember listening to John Denver as I grew up. Anne Murray, they talk about here as well. But then this was the stuff that got me really hooked into country, was country rock. And so
Right.
country rock in the 70s was more upbeat. Then you've got artists like Shania Twain, Brooks and Dunn, um, Garth Brooks, obviously huge, Dwight Yoakam, Steve Earle. I mean, all these influences really had a big evolution into country dancing at the time as well. Neo country, urban cowboy, we've touched on a little bit, but that's their terminology for it. And then as we move forward a little bit, the fifth generation we talked about is in the 1990s. And this is where we're talking about George Strait. And he's considered one of the more newer country artists. But that's when I was really into it, when my first. And line dancing revivals in the mid 1990s. That's when line dancing really took off. Alternative country, uh, different artists are referenced here as well. And sixth generation, we're talking about bringing it right up to the 2010s. And now we're referencing artists that are in today's, limelight, like Carrie Underwood, Miranda Lambert, and 210 Taylor Swift.
Right, of
So
course, yeah.
these are all these are all more modern. I'm not going to bore everybody with this, but this was kind of interesting when I was doing a little bit of digging on this nitty gritty. So these guys still continue to have an influence in the country scene. The music is still popular. Cadillac Ranch has been around forever, still is, still being played all the time.
Yeah, everybody knows it.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, we still teach it,
Hmm.
and it's 1970. Oh my goodness, it's 50 years old. Oh, and there's Dolly Parton again that they referenced, and oh yeah, Waylon Jennings. And then things change again in 1980s.
So I didn't know that the Western and country weren't originally like the same thing.
I really wasn't clear on that either, and I didn't read a whole bunch of the details of this. I just kind of knew where I started is that it was more traditional than it is today. I got annoyed when, and we're going to talk about this, when
Hmm.
cha cha came on the scene and we're the Latin influenced country. But we'll just keep going forward here. People can reference this on themselves. This is off the country music website. Wikipedia was one. And then here we have Winona and Naomi Judd,
Hmm.
1980s. There's Dwight Yoakam again. So, the history is really interesting. But the reason I bring this up and have people reference this is that our dancing has changed with the music over this time period. So that's the only reason I wanted to bring that up and show everybody. So in the 1970s, we really were more traditional. In the 1980s, we had shuffles and chatisses, like I had mentioned, and those were kind of the pattern dances. But in the 1990s, things started to change. There was more of a Latin influence from, and this is more my memory here in Alberta than anything, because we started to be involved in dance competitions and festivals and whatnot. And in the beginning, that stuff didn't exist in different uh, dance festivals. Whereas in the 1990s, cha cha, six step, and Latin, they were having a bigger influence in it. So it was very interesting. But from my perspective, that wasn't country.
Right, of course.
Now that's going to change again because you take that as a standard. Cha cha is part of country, right? Yeah.
Well, at least I mean I learned it at Country Pride, so to me it seemed like we were doing a bit of everything.
And we
And
do
yeah.
because we do 8 different dances. We actually do probably a little more than that. I think we do about 10. But in the 1990s, that's when cha cha, six step, it came along. And so that was kind of the Latin influence.
So I didn't realize six step is Latin. Um, was
No,
it bigger? Was it bigger? Oh, it's not.
it's not. That's just when it kind of came on the scene
Okay.
because we really weren't dancing to that kind of music until that time period. So, yeah, it evolved into those dances because the music evolved at that time. Uh, in the 2000s, swing started to become
Yes.
popular. And swing originally started from jive and East Coast swing. And there's a lot of country artists that we've mentioned in that history that I showed you that started playing that kind of music. They started playing music that would be more considered rockabilly, where you would do East Coast swing. Wasn't old school like Jerry Lee Lewis and jive, but it would definitely had the influence of more rock and roll, if you want to call it.
Yeah, it's faster. It's more upbeat. Kind of. Would you call it like more party
Yeah,
or
yeah,
like?
absolutely. Whether you call it not Willie Nelson, but yeah, the different Dwight Yoakam. Yeah, a lot of those definitely had a different feel to it. In the in the 2010s, and this again goes back to there was more rockabilly and bluegrass, so that also had an influence in it. In the 2020s now, just about anything, and it's even getting more contemporary, and it's going to continue to change. But now, whether it's something that we used to dance to in the 1990s, like Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, so we do line dancing,
Mhm.
and there's been all kinds of line dancing over that time period that weren't even close to country, um, and two step. They've it's been part of the mainstay over that whole time period. But then we kept adding to our repertoire. So whether it was cha cha, whether it's a swing music, all that stuff becomes part of our, I don't know if we call it repertoire, it becomes part of our family of dances that we do.
Yeah,
Um,
these are all songs that you have a good chance of hearing at a country bar, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And some people, they'll have their favorites because they'll have their favorite artists that they like to listen to. And it's kind of interesting because some artists will play certain types of music. Like I keep mentioning George Strait. Well, he had a ton of two steps, but other artists wouldn't play any kind of two steps. And
Mm.
then other artists will play more swing music. Um, Kind of looking at kind of wrapping this all up here for today is the whole idea of West Coast swing.
Mm.
West Coast swing has probably been one of the biggest influences as far as encompassing all different kinds of music. Whereas there's only certain kind of music you could two-step to. Um, you you can two-step to rock music, but it doesn't quite feel right. You definitely can't waltz to some other music that's not waltz music.
No.
But West Coast swing, it can be rock and roll, it can be country, it can be blues, it can be anything. Um, and I know you've been involved with our West Coast swing flash mobs and rallies.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's nice. It's fun. It's different.
Hmm.
Um, do you know where West Coast swing originated?
I believe the West Coast of the United States, so
Oh,
California.
okay. So yeah, yeah.
That's why it's called West Coast. It was originated in the bars there because they couldn't do a lot of the floors were really busy, and so they it was a different it was a derivative between jive and jitterbug, and they figured out how to do slots, and then that's when they put West Coast in, and then the music started to evolve to accommodate people. So that was on the West Coast. The East Coast had more of the other influence. So yeah, and that's why they're called Eastern West Coast swing. And there's actually even more types of swing, but we won't get into that because we don't see them too much up here in Canada.
Okay.
um, so there's a little bit of a history and overview, and we are going to do a podcast where we actually go into the different types of music and help people determine it. But as much as it's a blessing, it's also been a bit of a curse of ours because we have so much choice when it comes to country dancing and country music.
Right.
People say, "Well, this is my favorite country song," and yes, it's country music, but we haven't taught that one yet, or because there's just so many dances people can learn at the moment.
Yeah. So it really becomes hard for us to choose what dances are we going to do in a season because you have to leave something out because we do so many.
Yeah,
You teach so many.
yeah,
But of course, like there's a few that always make it in there. So I guess we could call those the popular favorites, right?
yeah. The
You're
core
gonna see
stuff.
two step,
Yeah,
West Coast swing.
yeah, and now West Coast swing is definitely one of those core dances. So yeah, I guess we'll wrap that up for today, and we'll get into some more details as far as what dance to do to what kind of music on the next podcast. So thanks,
Okay,
Stuart.
well, thank you.
And
Love this shirt.
I forgot to mention it's summertime. I was sitting
It
out by the pond and decided to come in, but this is my koi shirt, so had to had to show it off. There you go. There's my koi, and it's a cool shirt. It's nice and cool.
it's a beauty.
So we'll see everybody on the next podcast. Thanks very much.
See ya.